Thanks. Okay, so, oops. Okay, let me reduce it here. Oh, no. Sorry, just a second. There you go. Okay. All right. So today we will cover theory and we'll talk a little bit about how interviews are an opportunity for us as activists to put our words out there, to put our messages in the world. And we will also give simultaneously some tips for interviews. These tips are collected long years of experience from the 350.org team, but also from other teams in the climate movement, from press relations company. So these are the sources of these tips and of this view of interviews as an opportunity that we'll share. And we will also have a practical part of our talking today. It will be an interview simulation and a little bit of feedback for us to practice a little bit, warm up our interview skills. And I would like to start actually, sorry, I'll just find the links here. I would like to start with a poll uh, to for us to learn a little bit about um, what are our experiences with the media. So if you can please click on this link that I posted on the chat. And please answer to this question. The question that we have there is, and I'll open it here, about your previous experience with the press. We would like to know if you have already given interviews. So I'll give you a minute to answer. Let's see what is, in general, the experiences of this group. I'll stop sharing for now, okay? Let's wait just a little more. Okay, and now let's go to the second poll. We'll see the results in a moment. Let's go to a second poll here, which is about how do you feel about giving interviews? What is your feeling when you give interviews or when you think of giving interviews? So please feel free to answer. And let me just make a quick check. Are you guys being able to vote? Is everyone able to access this link and vote? If if there's anyone who is not able, please let me know. Okay, just a few seconds more for us to answer. And then we'll have a third question. Okay, this is our third question of the poll. So please feel free to answer this one as well. And the question there, I think you can see that, is um, what is, oh, is the question appearing there for you? Can you see the question on the slide or not?
No, it's not there.
Oh, sorry. So the question for number 3 is, can you remember of someone you consider a great interviewee? That is, someone who you think gives great interviews, or yeah, someone who gives great interviews. Do you remember of someone who gives great interviews? If you do, please try to think about what makes that person a great interviewee. Is it his or her way of speaking? Is it his or her tone of voice? Is it the words that that person uses? What makes someone give great interviews, in your opinion? Yeah, thanks, Amira. That's the question. It was a little bit long. It should appear there. I'm sorry. I don't know why it didn't appear. And we'll give a little bit more time for this answer. Hmm. Yeah, so let's skip the last question. Yeah, because then we can just start talking a little bit about the answers. Why open the answers here? So for question number one about previous experience, is there anyone who would like to share your answer? Is there anyone, for example, who would like to share if you have or not an experience with the press? No? Or maybe let's skip to the question number two, which is what do you feel when you think about giving interviews? Did anyone answer that? Do you feel very nervous or very anxious? Did anybody reply that and would like to explain or share your feeling? Yeah, I see Isaiah. Please go ahead.
Isaías.
Isaiah.
Yes, well, I, uh, I am a lawyer. I am the director of an NGO working on environment preservation in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. Well, I've been interviewed a lot of time in different scenarios, like in law. I also run in politics. So I've been interviewed in a lot of occasions. On television, I used to have a TV program. So I feel like normal when somebody is in front of me with a camera or a microphone. I used to have the microphone and the camera. I have um, YouTube station channel, and sometimes we use it. So I don't feel like nervous or something like that. I'm accustomed to that.
Great. Thank you, Isaiah. That's good to know. Thanks a lot. So I'll show the results for the question number one, just so that you know how this group answered. Let me share again the screen. Sorry about that. Okay. So, um, oops, why isn't it here? It should, oh, there it is. Okay. So here's how you answered. We had one person saying, I never gave an interview. We had a second or two people saying I did it once or twice. One person said I gave a few interviews already, and one person said interviews are or were at some point frequent in my life. So we have a diverse range here of experiences with interviews. That's interesting. It shows that we have a diverse group in this aspect. And I think it will be very useful for us to think about our relationship with the press and the interviews. Let's see the question number two. What were your questions or your answers? I'm sorry. Um, I'm opening it here. Um, so the question for number two was, how do you feel when you think of giving interviews? So we had one person saying, I feel very uncomfortable and anxious. There was one person saying uncomfortable, but okay. Three people said, not my area of expertise yet, but I would like to try. And two people said comfortable. I think I like it. Okay, so this is great. I think we have also a diverse range, but I see that most participants here, most of us said it's not my area of expertise yet, but I would like to try. So that's great. And for the people who said uncomfortable or very uncomfortable, don't worry. It's really, really normal to feel uncomfortable when giving interviews. All of us feel the same, especially in the beginning. But as anything else, interviews get better with the practice, right? And we'll talk here about tips about interviews so that you can feel more at ease when you give interviews. And finally, for our last question, let me open it here. Sorry, it should be here already, but let me open it. Okay, let me stop sharing a little bit and I'll show you the results for our question number 3, which was, we asked you about someone who you think is a great interviewee and what makes that person a great interviewee, right? So I'm opening here so that you can see what you guys answered. And I'll share my screen again. Okay, I think you're seeing my screen again. And here's the answers. Here are the answers. So someone said, when I'm nervous, I get really flustered and stutter a lot. Also, someone said, they kept a respectful tone when they were able to share facts, data, examples, able to redirect questions. Then there was an answer about the person is confident and happy. This is very interesting. Yeah, that is something we'll talk about. And finding the right words for the idea that is in my brain. That's interesting. And then Elizabeth Colbert, that is, of course, a specific example. I love how she uses a simple vocabulary. I read a book about hers for one of my classes. And after her interviews, I bought her second and third books. That's really, really nice. Very interesting example. So I can see by the answers here that there is we probably see a lot of value in the interviewees who speak in a simple way and who are confident and respectful, right? So these are already some tips or some ideas for us to give interviews. Always try to use the simple vocabulary, be as simple as you can, and also try to show that you are in a very good mood, very confident there. But anyway, let's talk about other tips right now. Thank you so much for your answers. This was really interesting. Would anybody like to make any comment before we move to the part about why interviews are an opportunity? Any questions, comments so far? I'll stop sharing my screen here. Questions? We're good? Okay. Let me share my screen again with the presentation. All right, so very quickly talking about why interviews are opportunities to spread your point of view. We were just talking about this in our small group, our breakout room, right before we started, right? The media is a space that still has a lot of credibility in our world. We can always use social media. We can always use our community channels to talk to people. But when something is published in the media, it comes to people, it reaches people with more credibility, and it usually has the information shared in a way that is clearer and that is more objective than when we have it in other channels. Plus, media has also a lot of reach. So it's really important to use the media for our campaigns. It's always a tool that climate campaigners, climate activists use. And I think when we get to an interview, it's really important that we arrive there with this attitude of knowing what you're going to say and feeling that you are also a participant. You are a co-builder. You are a co-responsible of the interviews, right? So when you get to an interview, be aware of where you are, who you are, and how you're leading the conversation. Don't get there just to answer the questions. You're not just answering to the interviewer, right? You are participating in a co-construction, in a conversation that you and the interviewer build together. So an interview can look sometimes, or if you realize, if you pay attention to interviews, sometimes they look like sales pitches. because there's someone trying to sell an idea to the interviewer. Sometimes it might look like a dance because the interviewer and the interviewee, they're exchanging an interesting flow of information. So it might be something soft. And sometimes it looks like a fight. Sometimes you can see the interviewer being rough and the interviewee being rough as well. And each of them is trying to take the interview to their own field of comfort, to their own zone of interest. So it is possible that you find interviews in with all these aspects, right? When you go to an interview, this might happen. But I think anyway, no matter how the interview, what is the tone of where the interview is taking you to, the important piece for us to remember is you can take the interview to the place that you want. You can take the interview to your zone of interest. Remember that you are an active participant of the interview. You're not there just to answer. You're there to make the conversation go to the direction you want it to go. Okay. Also, when we talk about interviews, it's important to realize that interviews begin before you go to the interview. Before the journalist turns on the recorder, the interview has already begun. Why do we say that? Because you have to prepare when you go to an interview. The more you prepare before the interview, the better will probably be your interview. So how do we prepare for an interview? We prepare by asking ourselves and by researching a little bit of all these things, where we are. So, for example, what is the media outlet that you're giving the interview to? Who is the interviewer? If you know who will be your interviewer, if you know who is the journalist who you're going to talk to, you can always check online if that person has a LinkedIn, if that person has already published stories about climate or about environment, and see how that person covers that. What is his or her interest in that area? So that you learn more about that person's profile and that media outlet's profile. This will help you understand what kind of information or what kind of tone they want from you, right? Also, what is the place of the world that you're talking to? Is it a local, very local media outlet? Are you talking to the people in your community, or are you talking to the entire country? Or are you talking to an international media outlet, and then people who are not from your country will need to understand what you're saying? So depending on what is the outlet and where that outlet is talking from, right? What is the scope of that media outlet? The way you talk might change, right? And it's important to know about that. So you can also think about your audience. So are you talking to people who already know a little bit about climate, or are you talking to people who um, might have never heard about climate crisis, for example? This will also change the way you speak and the tone. And also, it's really important to ask yourself, why are you giving that interview? What is your interest in that interview? Do you think that interview will help you, for example, change the minds of the people in your community about a topic that is of your interest? So what is the audience there? Is it what is your intention there? Do you want to change minds, or do you want to influence public policies, for example? Or do you want to make people just more aware of something? So how is that interview contributing to your campaign, or how is that interview contributing to your organization or to your cause? If you think about it before giving an interview, this will help you prepare and get to the interview with an attitude that will probably lead you to a good interview. Any questions so far? I can't see you because I'm sharing the screen, but if you have, please feel free to open the mic and ask it. If no questions, I'll follow up. Okay. So we already talked about the importance of knowing what you want to say, right? But how do we do that? So here we're going to share something that is really, really common for people giving interviews, which is key messages. Key messages are the messages that are important for you to take on your pocket for any interview, right? So, for example, let's say that you're working on a campaign you want to ask governments to invest, or the government of your country to invest in adaptation for the climate crisis. Let's say this is your campaign. Supposing this is your campaign, what kind of message, or what do you really want people to learn and to know about that? What do you want the government to learn about that? Or what do you want the people you're talking to learn about that. These are the key messages. Um, Before going to an interview, you can always write your key messages. This will help you um, start to practice. You start practicing when you write your key messages, and this will help you also separate what is accessory from what is key, from what is central in your interview. And once you discover what is central in your interview, you can take it with you and repeat it in the interview. Talk about it a few times so that people will keep that in mind. Also, another important thing about key messages is that they are simple, striking, and should be repeated. What do we mean by that? Key messages are a message that anyone can understand. They're also a message that will remain in people's mind because they're new, they're creative, or because they have a very, very strong data, or because they make a fun words game. So when you use something such as the example we have here, water is worth more than gold, which is the example we see on the story here on the screen. Uh, this is the quote from the activist Esteban Polanco to an interview that he recently gave to The Guardian, the newspaper from the United Kingdom. So this phrase is a good example of how striking a key message can be. Water is worth more than gold. This is very simple. This is very striking because we immediately think how valuable water is for anyone. Because if it's worth more than gold, he created here an image that makes us realize and understand very clearly what he wants to say, right? And it should be repeated in the sense that throughout the interview, you can mention your key message more than once because this is what you want people to stay with, right? Um, on the right column here of the screen, we have another example of a key message that is really good, and it came from the Prime Minister of Barbados. I'm sorry, and she said, "We do not know yet, or we do not yet know how to live on planet Mars. We only know how to live on Earth." This is a really good key message in the sense that, oh, I'm sorry, in the sense that she could have said the same thing in a more complex way, and this wouldn't have the same effect. People wouldn't be that touched by this phrase. But she chose to say it in a way that really touches us, that really makes us imagine, well, we cannot live on planet Mars. So if the Earth is the only thing we have, how valuable is it, right? So she used a little bit of there's even some poetry there in what she said, but she used a different way of saying we need to take care of this planet, right? Also, she continued and said, the same oil and gas companies, bankers, transport companies, insurance companies, they're living on planet Earth too. So why does it make sense to earn hundreds of billions of dollars in profit for only 10 or 20 years rather than being able to sustain profit for the next century or two? So she's basically saying, hey, bankers, hey, companies, you need to pay attention to what you're doing because if this planet is in trouble, you will be in trouble as well, right? But she's saying this in a way that is very clear, that is very striking, and this makes a good key message. So this is the kind of thing that you can use when you are going to an interview. You can think of a comparison, an image that you would like people to see, or you can think of a story that you want to share, even stories from your own personal life, if you feel comfortable with sharing this, or stories that you saw in your community. So sharing something that makes people understand, empathize with that, and that makes people see it in a different way with new eyes. What you are saying is something that will really help you be more assertive. It will help you have a better interview. Questions so far? What would you like to know about key messages? Any doubts, questions? No
Well,
questions? Please
yes,
go ahead.
it's not a question. It's just adding to it. I prepared some imagine some figure to use in my interviews to give the people who I go to interview to express so they know what I'm trying to do. As a photographer, we say one image say more than 1,000 words. So if you let me share what I design, could I show you?
Yeah, yeah,
Let me see.
please.
Let me see if can I share it in my the screen. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Can you, I don't know if you can.
Yeah. You
Okay.
said, could you see
Uh,
my image?
yeah, I think I'm seeing it. Yeah. No, no, I can't see that.
Anybody can see my image? No, 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 I,
No. Do you think you could say that? Is it an image that
well, I have it on my screen right now. I just ready to share it. Let me see. Okay, here it is. You see now?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, I doing some imagine like this, but a few one. So I use it for my campaign, for my interview, so the people know what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to do. I have a few of them. Let me see if I can show you another one. I make like three of these. Hold on a minute. Let me see where the other one goes.
Yeah, so let me interrupt you just a little bit to say this image is interesting because you can see on one side that you have a dry land, and on the other side you have a very green land. So in your interviews, if you can if you can describe this with words, this will probably give people an image of what you want, right? So if you tell people, I want a world where, or I want a country where we have green lands and not where we have the earth being struck by drought. This already helps people imagine. The more visual you can be when you are speaking something, usually the better. The more people can create that image in their minds. The same is valid for stories. If you have a story to share, then it's really good. But I'm sorry, Isaias, you were saying you were going to say something else, and then we will pass it to Jesse as well.
Exactly. Here is an example of what we're suffering every year after the
Mhm.
hurricane season that we are now. Right now, from until November, we are in the hurricane season. So a lot of rain, a lot of storm, and everything. We should have this result that we have in every year in different zone or areas of our country. That's why I try to make the people understand visually what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Okay?
Yeah, no, that's a very good example of something that you can mention in interviews, right? You can tell in your interviews that you're already seeing, your community is already experiencing this kind of effect. Because when you say that, then people understand, they empathize more than if you just said climate crisis is happening in my country. If you say, I can see the people suffering, I can see the people without losing their homes, I can see families that really need to turn
Moving
around.
out of the places because the
Ex-
disaster,
exactly,
every
exactly.
year the flooding causing a lot of sickness because the water get contaminated and we have a
Yeah.
lot of yeah.
And even
Okay.
if you can tell one story, that's usually very strong as well. So remember to take to your interviews stories, examples, images that will help your participation be even stronger than if you were just saying numbers or if you were just saying something more generic. So yeah, thanks, Isaias. Really, really good example with the images. And I'll pass it on to other people just so that we can keep our time under control. So
Yes.
I see that Jesse was raising his hand, and then Ziara. Jesse, would you still like to speak or not? Not anymore.
Yes,
Yes.
I have a question. I want to know what can be the undesirable effect of an inappropriate or unevocative key message.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Can you?
What can be the undesirable effect of an inappropriate or unevocative key message?
I think I couldn't understand. I'm so sorry. Can
Okay,
anyone write?
that I
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, what can be an undesirable or inappropriate key message? Oh, well, that's a good question. I think a key message is something that you take with you to the interview because you want people to keep that in mind, right? So I would say undesirable or inappropriate is a key message that will not be in people's mind. So if you take something too complicated, if you take something that is too technical, or if you take something that is too vague, I think this is undesirable because this will not stay in people's mind. So you have to try to be always simple, very imagetic, and have emotion besides numbers, besides facts. I think this is what makes a good key message. I think Caro has something to add.
Yes, another important thing about key messages are important because key messages can give the title of the article as well, like the main idea this person said. But nowadays, with social media, it's not only about the title of the article in the media, but also is maybe the moment that the journalists select for the reel on Instagram, and that is a part of the interview. But then it's a content in social media. So if you have a strong key message that which is a bad key message. A key message that is too long, when you repeat and repeat the same, and you don't find the end of the idea. So it's a good practice to explain your idea, but always you can have one last sentence, short, to end it. I don't know. Maybe we can avoid to say, and all this because we don't have planet B, or well, you know that cliche and phrase about planet B. There's no planet B. Now it's very cliche to say that, but maybe something similar, something that short to end a sentence, and give it's like gives the perfect stop, because sometimes we keep talking, we keep talking, we keep talking. So have like three ideas strong, keep there, and always have some way to end and to close it, and that's perfect. If you well, I don't want to spoil the next slides, but if, when you are clear, when you have clear ideas, you don't speak. Um, you don't speak so long. You don't take if you speak so long, the journalist is like maybe he doesn't have the idea correct. But well, sorry, I'm not English native
No, no,
speaking person.
no, we could totally understand. Thanks, Caras. Yeah, the importance of keeping it short and having phrases that even can be used in social media. This is a very good point because yeah, as Cara was saying, it's not just about the using strong sentences here and there, but also uh, speaking shorter phrases that so that this phrases can be used even for editions in videos. Does this answer, Jesse, what you asked?
good, good.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for your question. And Diara, please go ahead.
Hi, my question would be, how can we maintain consistency in our key messages? Because at the beginning of the presentation, you said that sometimes there are different audiences. So the way that I might speak to a target audience of teenagers might not be the same way that I speak to an audience of government officials or corporations. So how do we tailor our key messages to suit each audience, but still maintaining that consistency are the most important parts of the message?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you don't have to, yeah, as the examples you gave are really good. You don't have to use the same key messages in every interview. Actually, if you're giving interviews to different audiences, you will probably need to create different key messages, right? This example you mentioned is great. So if you're going to talk to someone from the government, you will probably need more information, maybe a little bit more of technical aspects, maybe a little bit more of in-depth information than if you're talking to someone who doesn't know much about that subject and still needs to know the basics, right? So you don't need necessarily to use the same key messages all the time. But what you asked about keeping consistency is interesting because you can have the same. I think it's important to remember what is your goal with that interview and what is your campaign goal, right? Because then around that goal, you can formulate it in different ways. So if your goal is, for example, as we mentioned, to have more investments from the local government in adaptation, when you talk to the government, you can use more numbers, or you can maybe use more technical information to talk to them, but you still refer all the time to the importance of adaptation, investments in adaptation. You can create your key messages around this same goal, right? And when you talk to the youth, for example, you can refer to the same goal, but using a different tone, using a different language, maybe using more examples and stories than numbers. So I think you can change the way you speak, but if you have a campaign goal, you can always try to convene that campaign goal on your messages. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. No, you're welcome. Okay, let's move on to the next point. Let me share again my screen. And we're finishing the theory part, and we're already quickly moving to the practical part of our session. Okay, so here is my presentation again. Oops. Another important aspect, oops, sorry. It's a little slow. Okay, so another important aspect of key messages is that you can take your own experiences to the key messages that you use. Sorry, let me open that again. So you can use your own experience, right? As we mentioned, if you have a good story, if you saw something interesting in your community that speaks to the subject that you're talking about, you can use it if you feel comfortable with it, because it will help people understand what you're saying. Interviews are not just reason driven. They're not just about numbers and facts. They're also about emotions. Actually, when we see someone speaking in an emotional tone, of course, if that person is not being too aggressive, or if that person is not bursting and out of control, but if that person is showing emotion with in what she or he is speaking, it even makes us empathize more with that person. So don't feel afraid of showing your emotions. Don't feel afraid of telling stories. Actually, it's very positive if you can tell a story, and don't feel afraid to use your own examples or your community's examples, right? And here is another important rule or tip that Kat already mentioned. In general, it is best to be brief. So less is more, also for interviews, right? Remember that you don't have to speak and speak and speak. A good speaker, a good interviewee is not someone who speaks a lot, or someone who speaks in a very verbal way. Actually, the best speaker is the person that is brief and precise. The more you can be precise and concise, probably the more people will keep your message in their minds. And finally, another technique that we would like to share is the ABC technique, which is a technique that is important for the tough questions, right? When we're giving an interview, sometimes we feel a little concerned that a certain question will come up, right? So let's say, for example, that you're giving an interview about the climate movement in your country, and then your concern is that people ask, for example, about a specific case of something that didn't work well. That would be your tough question in that situation. How can you handle this? How can you talk about that tough question, or how can you answer that tough question uh, when you go to an interview? You can prepare and you can use the ABC technique, which is ABC stands for acknowledge, bridge, and continue. ABC. Acknowledge means telling the interviewer that what she or he is asking is important and that we agree that this is important. Then B means you will bridge. That means even though this is important, what is actually even more important is that, right? And then C is continue. Continue means go to your field of expertise, go to the place where you feel comfortable. So you acknowledge that this is important. You mention that there are things that are even more important, and then you start talking about the things that you think really need to be discussed, right? So this is what we were saying when we, in the beginning of this conversation, we said that in the interview, you're an active part of the interview. You don't have to stay in the field of the asker or of the interviewer all the time. You can take the conversation to the field where you want to play, right? And this is what the ABC technique helps us. You acknowledge, you bridge, and then you continue on your field. An example of phrase that you can use to do this is, let's say, in that example that I was giving, you can say, well, there was this case, and we all agree that that case was meaningful, and we need to acknowledge this. However, if we look at all the cases of success of the climate movement in our country, we will see that the climate movement has achieved so many things for our people. We were able to demand more resources for, or to obtain more resources for climate adaptation. We were able to help people improve their lives, etc. So what did I do here? I acknowledged that the question was important. I bridged it with a phrase such as, however, there is something that is even more important, or however, there is something that we need to have in mind. So I bridged this, and then I continued using the example of the things I wanted to talk about. Is that ABC technique clear for you guys? Did you understand what this technique means?
I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes.
Good.
Can I do my interview in Spanish? Because here in Dominican Republic, everybody speaks Spanish. And
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And
no, for sure.
that is my question from the beginning, because I organize in everything in my own language, so my own people could participate, and we could spread it in the Latin American, whatever.
Yeah, no, I see, Isaiah. So yeah, if you, we're going to the practice part now, and if you, we'll ask people to volunteer. So if you want to volunteer, actually for volunteering it won't work, but we'll have small rooms. So in your small room, then you can speak in Spanish. You can give your interview in Spanish. And yes, when you are giving an interview, the matter of language is also important, right? So if you're giving an interview in a language that is not your first language, I would advise you to mention this to the interviewer before the conversation starts. I would advise you to say, hey, I will give you an interview. It will be my pleasure. I just want you to know that my first language is Spanish, so I might not find the perfect word all the time, but I hope this is okay. If you say that openly, I think the interviewer will be much more open to asking you it in a way that will be easier for you, or he or she will be much more patient in the way that he will talk to you. So I think it's an important point to mention. Thanks. Okay, so any other question about the ABC technique? Any other thing you would like to ask before we go to our practice? Okay, so let's go to the practice. um, so we'll start with asking someone to volunteer, and then we'll give some feedback. So let me share my screen again. So this is the question that we're asking. Let's imagine a situation in which a journalist from El Nuevo Dia, which is a major newspaper in Puerto Rico, sends you the following email. Hi, I am writing an article about the impacts of the climate crisis in your region, and I would like to hear about your community's perspective on why the Caribbean countries need a just energy transition. Considering the region is responsible for a very small percentage of the global emissions, why should our countries care about this transition? So let's imagine that this is the email that you received, and you said yes to this interview. So now let's practice. I need a volunteer. Would anybody like to volunteer for this interview? It will be 3 questions. It's simple and easy.
I left the, if you want to volunteer and you don't know, you can read it carefully. We'll give you 1 minute so you can reflect if you are comfortable or not, and you tell us.
Okay, come on, people. I know you can volunteer. Any volunteers for this interview? Come on. And let me just, while we wait a little bit, let me share that first, giving an interview is also a matter of knowing that you will expose yourself to a certain degree, but that exposition, the exposure of yourself will be for a purpose, right? That you will be serving a cause. So you might feel exposed, but as I said, it comes with practice. The more you practice, the more comfortable you feel by with giving interviews, the more comfortable you feel with that sensation of feeling exposed, and the more comfortable also you feel with the way you speak, with your tone of voice, etc. So practice makes you better in interviews for sure. Okay, a few more seconds for a volunteer. Okay, we have Isaias volunteering.
Let's see.
Okay,
Well,
thanks.
who am I going to interview? Do you or who? Who want me to interview?
So we will interview you.
Carolina?
Carolina will. What? Yeah.
Karina? Karina, are you
Betty,
ready?
you can.
Go ahead.
Karina, are you ready?
Wait,
No,
I
we will.
want Karina to ask.
No,
We can make
To you. Okay,
we
Karina,
Betty. You can
let's
start
go.
with the first questions, and then if Karina, me, or who
No,
wants can ask as well.
you. Karina is not able. They have the microphone closed yet. Oh,
wait.
well.
Okay, let me just get something. I think I didn't understand. So we're going to interview someone, right? And by we, I mean me and Carolina.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we need someone to volunteer to be interviewed. Would you
Okay,
like to be interviewed, Isaias?
I'm going to interview both of you. Right.
You will be interviewed by us, okay?
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
You. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, so Isaias, thank you so much for your interview. I'm a journalist from El Nuevo Dia, which is a newspaper from Puerto Rico. And I would like to start by asking Isaias, why should we care about energy transition in the Caribbean or in Panama? Let's make it about Panama. Why should we care about energy transition in Panama if Panama is not one of the main emitters of CO2, right?
Petty,
Yeah.
wait, you said Panama because you want to, because he's from República
Oh,
Dominicana.
I'm sorry. I'm so
So,
sorry.
so
Apologies.
again, we go again.
Panama or Paraná?
I
No,
don't
no,
know.
Paraná.
no.
No, I don't know.
Dominic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why I said Panama, Dominican Republic. I think because you spoke Spanish and it's stayed in my head. I'm sorry. So let's talk about Dominican Republic. Okay, so Isaias, thank you so much for your interview. I will start asking, why should we care about the energy transition in Dominican Republic if Dominican Republic is not one of the main emitters in the world? It's far from that, actually. And we are suffering this crisis that was created by other countries. So why should we care about doing an energy transition in our region?
Well, thank you for the interview to give me the chance to talk to you all. Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, is an island state. We are in the center of the Caribbean, and every year we're suffering the effect of the climate change due to the disaster. We are the number 10 in the world affected by the climate change. So every year we have a lot of disaster, natural disaster. Like a few months ago in November, we had 10 people who died because a big flood in the street fell down one of those street, on the passage, on the bridge. The bridge fell down and collapsed, and then 10 people died under the water, under this, the beverage and everything. Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, we are the number 10 in the world in the effect of the climate change. So we need to be aware, we need to get conscious about the adaptation, about the resilience, about the climate change.
Isaias, a second question to you. How do you think how do you think the government in the Dominican Republic can work to improve the energy transition in the country? Is it possible? I mean, do we have the money, the resources for that? Where will the resources come from?
Well, in Santo Domingo, we have a movement, a few or a group or organization. Example, we have back on 1914, they start a construction of a power plant called Punta Catalina in the south of the island, south of the country. It's work with carbon, called carbon. We face a lot of fight to that plant to be converted from carbon, which is very harmful to the environment. The carbon, the emission is very harmful to the health, to the environment. And right now we're suffering the whole city because the ashes from that power plant is floating all over the city and making a lot of people sick from the lungs, and everything. So we are asking our government to close the power plant. We got more than 5 years working against that power plant be operated in our country.
Okay, but when you talk about this, don't you think the government should be using the money for more important things such as education, health? We see that many people still lack education and health. So why should we invest in something that is, well, it is already working? I mean, in the sense that we already have power in our country, so power generation, right? So why should we care about changing the way we generate power when we have people with basic needs that are not assisted?
Well, basically, the politicians, they don't care about the population. The population suffering but the government and the friends making money, so they don't care about the people here. So the population is our organization. We are enforced to defend, to be the voice of the population who's suffering the effect of the climate change during those kind of actions for the government. So we need to raise our voice every day to try to make everything change. But it's
Okay. Oh, it froze. Okay, thank you very much, Isaias, for your interview.
you're very welcome, and thank you for interview.
Okay, that's great. First of all, I would like to acknowledge Isaiah's willingness and courage to give this interview. Thank you so much for being the volunteer. This was great. And I would like to ask if you realized, I would like to start by asking if you realized two great things that Isaias did. Can anybody share what you thought was great? I would like two opinions here, please. Two positive feedbacks for Isaias on his interview. No, from other people, yeah.
No, I know. Only two. I mean two.
Yeah.
I can share. I think that it was really helpful that Isaias offered like personal anecdotes to tell stories. I think it just felt more meaningful and clear, and it made it more engaging as a listener.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree with this, Genesis. I think this was one of the strong points of his interview, that he used this kind of example and mentioned about his community and his some things that he saw. This was really helpful. I agree. What else? Any other positive feedback for Isaias on his interview?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Karina.
So I love that he provides specific examples like Punta Catalina, and actually he mentioned some numbers too. So it gives him some credibility, and you start to trust him in what he's saying. And I also admire that he connected every point back to the people, not talking about climate adaptation only as a movement. And usually you see interviews and we talk about climate crisis and forget about people and just talk about the natural phenomenon, what is happening. So I love that he actually put the people there. So yeah. Thank you, Isaias.
Awesome, great feedback. Yeah, that's true. Absolutely, he put the people there. What you mentioned about trusting him is a really interesting point as well. I did start trusting him after he started speaking. I think there's something about the way he used the examples and shared. It was a good mix of numbers and emotion, and numbers and stories. So I think he used it really well. And you're right. I started uh, believing what he was saying and started trusting him. Yeah. So really good. Okay, and now let's have one less positive feedback, something that Isaias could improve in his interviews, speaking just from this experience. Um, would anybody like to mention something? If not, I can mention that. Okay, Isaias, I think in my last question, it was the tough one, right? The question about, so why should governments invest on this instead of investing in other basic needs? Um, I think you could have used the ABC technique in that moment. You could have said, what you're saying is important. We know that there are people who still don't have access to great healthcare or to great education. However, and then you would start speaking about why climate solutions are important, right? You could say, however, the climate crisis aggravates all of them. People will have more health issues because of the climate crisis. The climate crisis can also stop people from going to school in certain places, or it can drain the resources that would go to education. So climate crisis is connected to everything. So I think in the last answer, I liked the answer that you gave, but I felt as an interviewer in that case, I felt that you were kind of running away from my question instead of acknowledging that it was important and then connecting it to your answer. Do you know what I mean? So I think you could have used the ABC technique in that aspect. However, it was really good in all the other aspects, in the sense that you were very trust, what's the word for that? Very reliable. I could really see what you were saying. You were able to build images. For example, when you mentioned the smoke that was coming from the plant, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I could see that image coming, right? So you build some visual images as well. You used specific examples. So I think you did really well. Congratulations. And yeah, anybody would like to share any other thing that you realize that is useful for our interview practice?
Maybe I can just add, because I thought it reminded me of myself a little. And I think like Karina mentioned it when we were doing the very introductions, that sometimes you kind of get nervous in interviews, or you're focusing on one thing and you forget to connect something else to it. So I think just for the first question, Isaias, like you started off really great with the examples, but I think just kind of closing it off in terms of connecting that, okay, these disasters and examples that you're explaining will kind of get worse if we don't transition to do like an energy transition, or maybe like connecting the energy transition as maybe the solution to some of the impacts that you were describing. I think that you gave a really vivid description of the impacts persons were facing, but maybe there was just like a last line that was needed to help persons who aren't like in the climate space to understand that the energy transition is kind of the solution to reducing these disasters, or because we are using like bad fossil fuels, that's why we're experiencing the disasters. So I think for me, like a lot of times when an interviewer, like somebody asks me a question, I get like the train of thought of where I should go. And then I would start out answering and giving the explanations and then forgetting the ending that is supposed to connect it. So I think just like that little thing I saw in some places, just being able to connect the ending of what you're saying to the answer to the question that maybe people are looking for.
Yeah, that is true. Sometimes we tend to get, I don't think this is what happened with Isaiah's throughout interview, maybe in specific points, but sometimes we tend to forget, speaking in general, we tend to forget about what we're saying, right? When we're saying, when we're speaking, even when we're talking to someone, but in interviews, it might happen as well. You start saying something, then you get lost in the details, or you divert to a different story, and then you forget what was the main thing that you wanted to say. This is why key messages are so important. So have a key message with you, and remember that you want to get back to that point. That is the point that you want people to leave with from your interview, right? You want people to leave your interview with that. So remember to use your key messages so that you can always find your way back to what matters, right, to you. Okay, so we still have time for a breakout session, very short one, 10 minutes breakout sessions. And we would like to do rooms for two people, right? So we'll have 5 minutes for each, and you will simulate an interview with the other person. So you will create a question, that person will answer. This will take 5 minutes. Then in the other 5 minutes, that person who answered first will ask you a question and you will answer, right? The important here is not that you know everything that you're saying, or it's not important to think of the best question in the world, but just practicing some of the techniques that we discussed here, practicing ABC, practicing key messages, practicing using examples and stories. Okay, this is what we're going to do now. This is the purpose of this breakout session. So we'll start in a minute. Yeah, Caro, please.
Sorry, I missed 1 minute or two because light went off here, and I wanted to say something before we break.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Well, people went to the rooms, but if we can please turn on the camera because it's easier for when we are interviewed to like feel that other people are there in press like physically helps a lot to see faces of the others. So if you can, it's great if you turn it on, and if you can't, okay, it's okay. We don't have any problem.
Okay, thanks, Caro. Okay, so let's join the breakout room now, and we have 10 minutes, then we'll get back. Thanks.
Ah, mira cómo lo organizaste. O yo
Eh,
no me estoy usando el grupo, no sé por qué.
Está Karina sola en el grupo. Se supone que ustedes dos
¿Y cómo
estén
puedo ir yo a ese
con...
grupo?
Eso estoy tratando de ver. Le envié la invitación. Isaías, a ti tampoco te
Claro,
salió.
es que yo puse después.
Really thank you all for participating, for engaging, especially in this last part. It was really, really fun, and I loved it. I hope you have liked it. So to close this session, I would like just to ask if you could say one word of something that you will take with you, something that you will remember, or that you want to exercise, something that you want to develop after this training. Can we start with a volunteer?
I can go. So I really enjoyed the exercise. I think the feedback that I'll be taking with me is like trust. I appreciated that that feedback was offered to different people, and how it applies to me is that my background is in scientific research, and so sometimes to um I hesitate about the words that I use to communicate to other people, and I don't want to find myself too far down a rabbit hole, but I don't want to um use that as an excuse to not like really delve into the emotion and the imagery that might create like a compelling narrative. So I think I'm gonna learn how to trust the balance between like the data and the scientific components, but also like the emotion and the examples like connected to why I care so much about food systems in the Caribbean.
Awesome. Thank you. Who else? Anybody else would like to share?
I can go. Hi everyone. The word that I will take is slow, as in slow down. Because I have a habit. I am a Trinidadian, as many who speak very fast, very quickly. And I've been told twice and reminded twice that I need to kind of slow down, and I think that comes from me just trying to rush through the message, but it's okay to slow down, make sure that the message is delivered in a way that the person can understand and really take into consideration what I'm saying and just be relaxed with it. So that's the word that I'll carry today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Awesome. If there's anybody else who would like to share, we still have, well, we're past the hour, but if anybody would like to share, we still can open the mic. Please feel free to do this. Karina.
Yeah, I really love the advice of the ABC technique. I will be defending my thesis in 2 weeks. So I know that probably I shouldn't use that technique for my thesis, but I promise I will give it a good practice on my defense. Because I think it's genius to acknowledge, breach, and continue. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope this helps, and good luck with your thesis. I hope it works really well. And I think the ABC works even in family discussions. So yes, take it with you and use it when you think it's appropriate. But yeah, good luck with that. It's great to know that you will be able to use it. Okay, I think we should close because we're already late. But thank you so much once again. It was really a pleasure, really great to see you all and do this session with you all. Please feel free to let me know if you need anything, if you want, I don't know, any specific advice, if you need anything, any question, or if you have a suggestion about how we can do this training, please feel free to reach out to. Thanks. And Amira and Caro, would you like to say something as well, or can we wrap up?
Oh, nothing to add, but it was very nice to meet you all, and I wish you all the luck on your own projects.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Caro, Peri, for an excellent training. I didn't expect otherwise. Thank you so much. And everyone, you will be receiving an email with the slides and the recording so that you can review during the week, and we will see each other next week at the same time for our video and photography training. Take care,
Okay,
everyone. Thank you.
bye-bye. So
Thank
long.
you so much.